Have you ever wondered what might happen when two lonely souls, a human and a dog, cross paths by chance? Can they heal each other's wounds, or are they just solitary lives destined to pass quietly by one another? And what if the seemingly tranquil life they share suddenly faces a threat? Who will rise to protect whom? Imagine a small town nestled amidst the lush, rolling hills of Asheville, North Carolina. Here, cobblestone streets wind through vibrant gardens, and quaint houses with weathered wooden roofs stand as timeless witnesses of days gone by. In one such house lives Mrs. Clara Johnson, a 70-year-old woman all alone. Mrs. Clara is the kind of person who makes you feel warm just by looking at her, with her silver hair as radiant as moonlight and her gentle smile. She embodies peace. But behind those kind eyes lies a deep loneliness that even time has been unable to heal. Her house, though modest, is impeccably neat. Every corner is lovingly cared for. Pots of bright red geraniums adorn the Doyles. A small table in the kitchen waits for her afternoon cup of tea. And in the living room stands an old piano where she spends hours playing the melodies her late husband George once adored. George had passed away 10 years ago, and since then, Clara had taken to writing letters to him as if he were reading them from somewhere far away. Besides George, Clara has only one remaining family member, her nephew, Tom, the son of her late sister. But Tom lives in a big city, caught up in the whirlwind of work and modern life, rarely finding time to call or visit. Clara doesn't blame him. She understands that life often sweeps people away. Yet whenever she looks at the empty armchair in her living room where Tom once sat reading books as a child, her heart grows heavy. Clara's life is a quiet loop. Each morning, she steps outside to water her small flower garden, which she has nurtured with love and memories. By midday, she sits by the window, penning letters that will likely never be sent. And in the evenings, the sound of her piano fills the house, breaking the silence of the walls. The town of Asheville is peaceful, but sometimes that peace turns into a loneliness so profound it cannot be named. Clara lived this way day after day, until one morning when an unexpected encounter changed everything. Let me tell you the story of Clara Toby and a night that would alter their lives forever. That morning, the Asheville sky was a brilliant shade of blue without a single cloud in sight. Clara decided to go shopping earlier than usual to avoid the scorching summer heat with her familiar woven basket in hand. She wandered around the small market, picking up a few essentials. The colourful stalls, the aroma of freshly baked bread, and the cheerful chatter of the locals created a lively atmosphere that she seldom immersed herself in. As she stepped out of the supermarket, Clara suddenly stopped in a hidden corner near the parking lot. She spotted a thin, golden retriever curled up on the hot concrete ground. Its once golden fur was now scruffy and matted with dirt. The dog lifted its head at the sound of footsteps, its large brown eyes gazing at Clara with a sorrowful, exhausted look that tugged at her heart. A long scar ran across its back, a painful testament to the harsh life it had endured. Clara felt her heart ache. "How long has this dog been here?" she asked a supermarket manager nearby. The man, busy stacking shelves, turned to her and replied, "Oh, it's been wandering around here for weeks. I heard its old owner abandoned it after it got injured. Nobody wants to adopt an old, scarred dog." Clara knelt down, looking directly into the dog's eyes. In those eyes, she saw not only pain, but also a faint glimmer of hope, as if it were pleading for someone to rescue it from its misery. She stood there for a moment, torn by her thoughts. She had never owned a dog before, and wasn't sure if she had what it took to care for one that required so much attention. But then her heart spoke louder than her reasoning. "This dog needs a home," Clara told herself, "and I need a companion." She turned to the manager and said, "I'll take it home." The manager looked momentarily surprised, but quickly nodded. "All right, but you should know it's going to need a lot of care," he said, gesturing to the scar on the dog's back. Clara didn't hesitate. She gently knelt down and patted the dog's head. It flinched at first, but then, seeing the kindness in her, her eyes cautiously moved closer. Clara stroked its scruffy fur and said, "From now on you'll have a home. I'll call you Toby." The journey home with Toby was quiet. The dog sat in the back seat of Clara's old car, occasionally glancing at her through the rear-view mirror. Clara smiled softly, feeling a strange but welcome sense of connection that she hadn't felt in a long time. As they drove, she spoke to Toby in a calm, yet determined voice. "We both carry scars, Toby, but from now on we'll help each other heal all right." When they arrived home, Clara led Toby into her small house. The dog hesitated at the doorway, looking around as if unsure this could truly be its new haven. Clara guided it to a corner of the house where she had prepared an old cushion. "This will be your spot," she said with a smile, but Toby didn't lie down immediately. Instead, it walked over to her, rested its head on her lap, and gazed at her with eyes full of gratitude. Clara sat down, gently stroking Toby, and for the first time in years, she felt her less begin to fade. Clara didn't know it then, but her decision to bring Toby home that day would not only change her life, but also set the stage for an extraordinary story they would write together. Toby, the abandoned dog, would become more than just a companion in the days to come. He would prove to be her protector and her hero in the first days with Toby. Clara quickly realized that taking care of a dog was no simple task, despite having a new home. Toby still carried a sense of caution. He often curled up into the corner of the house, his eyes watching Clara wearily. Whenever she approached, he would inch away slightly as if fearing that any gesture might bring him harm. Clara sighed, but refused to give up. "We both need time, don't we, Toby?" she said softly, placing a bowl of fresh water and some food near him before quietly stepping away in the afternoons. As usual, Clara sat down at her old piano in a corner of the living room. Her fingers gently glided over the keys, creating soothing melodies she had often played for her late husband many years ago. The music seemed to whisper into the quiet space, calming her soul in the process. The first time Clara noticed a change in Toby was on one such afternoon. As the music filled the room, Toby moved out of his corner and slowly walked toward Clara. He didn't come to close, but lay down at a distance where he could still hear every note. His long ears perked up, and the cautious look in his eyes softened as he gazed at her. Clara noticed and smiled gently. "You like music, don't you? Toby, then from now on I'll play for you every afternoon." And so day by day, Toby became a regular audience for Clara. Every time she sat down at the piano, he would instinctively move closer. Lying down beside her feet, his eyes half closed as if savoring each note, Clara began to feel that Toby's presence was more than just a responsibility. It became a source of comfort in her life. One day, Clara discovered something special about Toby while she was tidying up the house. The mop accidentally fell, making a loud noise. Toby immediately sat up straight, his eyes focused and alert. Curious, Clara gave him a command. "Sit, Toby." To her surprise, Toby obeyed. Immediately he sat still, his eyes on her, as if waiting for the next instruction. Clara tried again. "Lie down." Toby followed the command precisely where you trained. Before Clara wondered, both surprised and touched, she knelt down, stroking Toby's soft fur, and said, "You really are a special dog." From that moment, the bond between Clara and Toby grew stronger. Toby became more than just a dog, he became a true companion. Each morning, Clara would take Toby out to the garden to water the plants in the afternoons. The two of them would sit by the window, Toby resting his head on Clara's lap. While she read or knitted, Clara couldn't remember the last time she felt so at ease. Toby's presence filled the empty spaces in her life, erasing the loneliness that once seemed insurmountable. And although it still carried the scars of his past, both physical and emotional, Clara believed that they were healing together in their own way. "Thank you, Toby," she whispered one evening, while gently stroking him before bed. "You're the gift I never expected, but the one I needed most." But Clara didn't know that the bond between her and Toby would soon be put to the test in a night when both of them would face real danger. That night Asheville's sky was pitch black. Not a single breeze stirred, not a single sound broke the silence apart from the faint rustling of tree branches in the dark. Clara Johnson, after a long day, finally turned off the living room lights and prepared to head to bed. But as she folded her blanket, a low growl from Toby shattered the stillness of the house. Clara froze a chill running down her spine. She turned around to see Toby standing, motionless in the middle of the room, his ears perked up, eyes locked on the large window at the front. The dog didn't move, his muscles taut like a machine, poised to spring into action. "Toby, what is it?" Clara asked softly, her voice trembling. With unease, she approached the window, her hands trembling as she pulled the curtain slightly aside. Outside the garden lay blanketed in darkness. There was nothing but the shadows of trees stretching across the ground. Clara exhaled deeply, trying to reassure herself that Toby was merely reacting to the dark, but then a faint beam of light flickered from a flashlight at the far end of the backyard. It lasted only a moment before disappearing again. Clara froze in place, struggling to steady her breathing as the air around her seemed to grow heavier. "Maybe it's just someone passing by," she murmured to herself, though a part of her knew that was unlikely. At this hour, Toby's growling didn't stop this time. He began moving his slow, deliberate steps, circling the front door. His sharp eyes scanned the windows and his nose inhaled deeply. With every step, he was searching for something or someone. Clara could feel the tension radiating from him. This wasn't ordinary alertness. This was a real threat outside, hidden in the shadows. Derek, a thief from the city, stood concealed behind a cluster of dense trees. His face was obscured by a hood, and his cold eyes were fixed on Clara's small house. He had been watching her for weeks, learning her daily routine to him. This was the perfect target, an elderly woman living alone with no one to help her. Quick in, quick out leave, no trace. Derek muttered to himself, the weak light of his flashlight glinting off his face. He had no idea that within that house a protector was ready to do whatever it took to stop him. Meanwhile, Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Toby paced near the back door, his growl low and resonant, filled with power. The dog stopped at the door, staring into the darkness beyond as though he could see straight through it. "Toby, calmed down. It's nothing," Clara said, her voice shaking. But she didn't believe her own words. Her hands instinctively checked the locks on the doors and then moved to the windows, ensuring everything was securely shut outside. Derek crept closer. He gripped his bag of tools tightly, his eyes gleaming with self-assurance. An old lady in a small house. "This will be easy," he muttered. But just then, from inside the house, a loud bark shattered the night's silence. Derek froze in place. "A dog," he whispered, furrowing his brow as he stared at the house. But then he shook his head, letting out a dismissive laugh. "It's just a dog, probably as old and frail as its owner." What Derek didn't realize was that Toby, with every instinct of a guardian, was ready for anything. Clara, standing a few steps away from him, felt her heart racing as if it would leap out of her chest. Something's not right, she thought, clutching her phone tightly in her hand. The darkness blanketed the small house, and time seemed to stop. The quiet space braced itself for something, an impending moment that would shatter its fragile peace. And then everything was about to begin. Outside the house, the thick darkness blanketed everything. Derek, with a cold, calculating glare, crept toward the back door. His hand gripped a screwdriver tightly, his calloused fingers a testament to countless break-ins. He crouched low, examining the old lock with a sly smirk creeping onto his face. This would be easier than he had imagined. What Derek didn't realize was that inside the house, Toby's sharp ears had already picked up on every faint sound. The golden retriever lying in his usual corner near the back door immediately sprang to life. His keen eyes fixed on the door, and a low growl rumbled deep in his throat. His body stiffened, taut, like a bowering, ready to snap. Unaware of the dog's heightened alertness, Derek inserted his screwdriver into the lock. A faint click echoed as the lock gave way. Slowly he pushed the door open, the weak beam of his flashlight sweeping across the floor. But as soon as Dirk stepped inside, a deep, resonant growl shattered the silence guard before Derek could react. A large golden retriever lunged out of the shadows with the force of a storm. Toby leapt up, his sharp teeth clamping down on Derek's arm before he could fully grasp what was happening. Derek screamed, his voice ricocheting off the walls of the house. "What the hell is this?" Derek yelled, thrashing to free himself, but Toby held on with unrelenting strength. The dog's powerful body pinned Derek to the ground, his front paws gripping the intruder's arm like a vice. Clara, lying in bed upstairs, bolted upright at the sound of the commotion. Her heart felt as though it had stopped. She grabbed her phone from the bedside table and hurried down the stairs, calling out as she descended. "Toby, what's happening?" When she reached the living room, the scene before her was one she would never forget. Toby, her loyal golden retriever, had pinned Dirk to the floor. Derek's face was pale with fear, his wide eyes darting around desperately as he struggled to escape. But Toby's fierce determination held him firmly in place, unmoving. "Oh my God," Clara gasped, her hands trembling as she dialed. 911, police, please. There's an intruder in my house and my dog is holding him down." As Clara spoke with the dispatcher, Toby maintained his firm grip on Derek, his jaws clenched tightly around the intruder's sleeve, refusing to let him move an inch. Yet even in his fierce defense, Toby's actions were precise, controlled. He inflicted no severe injuries, acting more like a trained guardian than an aggressive attacker. "Let me go, I didn't do anything," Derek shouted, his voice rising in panic, but no one believed him. Least of all, Toby. The dog's sharp eyes stayed fixed on him, his ears twitching at every sound, prepared for any additional threats. Within minutes, the shrill wail of police sirens pierced the quiet night. Red and blue lights flashed across the front yard. As officers rushed into the house, when they saw the scene, they froze momentarily in astonishment. "Well, this dog knows how to handle business," one officer said, moving quickly to handcuff Derek while glancing at Toby with admiration. "Toby, that's enough, good boy," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion as she stepped forward and gently touched the dog. Toby obeyed her command, slowly releasing his hold, but his intense gaze remained locked on Derek, ensuring he was no longer a threat. Derek was promptly escorted out of the house. One officer turned to Clara with a look of respect. "We've heard stories about guard dogs before, but this is extraordinary. Your dog, he's a hero." Clara knelt beside Toby, wrapping her arms around him as tears streamed down her face. "Thank you, Toby," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I owe you my life." Toby responded with a soft lick on her hand, his eyes full of unwavering loyalty. That night, Toby didn't just protect Clara's home, he shielded her heart, proving he was far more than an abandoned dog. He was a true companion, a defender, and a hero in every sense of the word. The story of Toby and the events of that fateful night quickly spread across the small town of Asheville. It wasn't long before local newspapers began reporting on the brave dog who stopped a burglary and saved his owner's life. Images of Toby with his loyal eyes and golden coat appeared in articles and even on television news, hundreds of miles away in a cramped city apartment. Tom Claro's grandson was halfway through typing up a work report when something caught his attention on the TV. A heroic golden retriever protects his elderly owner, stopping a burglar in the dead of night. Tom turned his head sharply, his eyes fixed on the screen, when the news segment showed a clip of Clara standing outside her home with Toby by her side. His eyes widened in shock. "Grandma," he whispered, a sudden wave of guilt washing over him. Tom couldn't remember the last time he had spoken to her. Work friends and the hustle of city life had swept him away, causing him to forget the grandmother who had single-handedly raised him. He thought of the days when Clara used to wait for him after school, always with a warm apple pie ready on the kitchen table. Now the distance between them felt greater than the physical miles that separated them without hesitation. Tom grabbed his phone and dialed her number as the phone rang. His heart pounded. Would she even pick up? Tom Clark's voice came through, slightly surprised, but warm as always. "Grandma, I just saw you and Toby on the news," Tom said, his voice trembling. "I had no idea. Are you all right? Is Toby okay?" Clara sat down in her chair, her eyes softening as she listened to her grandson's voice. "I'm fine, Tom. Toby is a hero. He saved me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Tom took a deep breath, his voice heavy with regret. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I've been so caught up in my own life that I forgot about you. Hearing this news made me realize how much you mean to me. I want to come visit you," Clara smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "Tom, I don't blame you, but if you can come, it would mean the world to me. Toby and I will be waiting a few days later." A car pulled up in front of Clara's small house. Tom stepped out, tall and grown, but his eyes carried a hint of boyish nervous, like a child returning home after a long absence. Clara opened the door, standing on the porch with Toby by her side. The dog wagged his tail as if sensing the importance of the moment. "Grandma," Tom called out quickly, striding toward her and wrapping her in a warm embrace that hug full of warmth and emotion seemed to erase all the distance and time that had separated them. Clara smiled, her frail hands gently brushing Tom's hair. "You've grown so much," she said, her voice filled with pride. Tom knelt down and patted Toby on the head. "And here's our hero. Thank you, Toby. If it weren't for you, I don't know what I'd do if I lost Grandma." Toby wagged his tail even harder, his eyes shining as if he understood Tom's gratitude from that day on. Tom began spending more time with Clara. He helped her tidy up the garden, accompanied her on errands, and sometimes sat by her old piano, listening as she played the songs he had loved as a child. Toby was always there, an indispensable part of their small family. Clara felt the transformation in her life. From a lonely grandmother, she was now surrounded by love and care. Tom's presence not only warmed her heart, but also brought new energy to her home. Toby, the brave dog, had not only saved her life, but also brought her family back together one afternoon as Clara, Tom, and Toby sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky of fiery red. Clara said softly, "Sometimes the greatest miracles come from the smallest things. Who would have thought a stray dog could bring us so much right?" Tom nodded, his eyes on Toby, lying peacefully by Clara's feet. "You're right, Grandma. Toby isn't just a dog, he's a miracle in our lives." Toby lifted his head as if agreeing, and once again he filled Clara's heart with a sense of completeness she hadn't felt in years. Life for Clara had completely transformed. Since that fateful night, her small house was no longer cloaked in silence and loneliness. Each day now began with the rhythmic patter of Toby's paws around the house and the cheerful laughter of Tom, her grandson, who had returned to her life. Clara felt not only comforted, but also newly inspired to live with Tom's encouragement. She decided to do something she had never imagined: host outdoor piano performances for the residents of Asheville. Let music bring people together just as Toby brought our family back together, she said to Tom, her eyes sparkling with joy. On the day of the first performance, Clara was both nervous and excited. Tom had set up a small stage in her garden with rows of neatly arranged chairs as the townsfolk began to arrive. The garden buzzed with life, friendly chatter, laughter, and the eager anticipation of the audience filled the air. Toby sat beside Clara, his ears perked up as if listening to the lively conversations, when Clara took her seat at the old piano. A hush fell over the crowd. She began playing one of her favorite pieces, a gentle, nostalgic melody. Her fing danced gracefully over the keys, sending the music soaring into the golden glow of the sunset. The audience listened intently, with some even humming softly along to the tune. Toby, calm as ever, lay by her side, his eyes soft and serene, as if he too was soaking in Clara's happiness. When the music ended, the garden erupted into applause. Clara looked up, a radiant smile lighting her face. "Thank you all for coming today," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Sometimes we don't realize how small things can change our lives in the biggest ways. I found that in Toby, my most loyal companion, that evening. After everyone had left Clara, Tom and Toby gathered by the cozy warmth of the fireplace. Tom poured Clara a cup of herbal tea, while Toby curled up at her feet, his eyes half closed occasionally, wagging his tail as if savoring the peaceful moment. Clara gazed into the flickering flames, her voice soft, yet filled with meaning. Sometimes the best companions aren't people, but the beings who come into our lives when we need them most. Toby didn't just save my life, he saved my heart." Tom nodded, his eyes filled with pride as he looked at her. "You and Toby are proof of that, Grandma. I'm so glad we found our way back to each other." Outside, the soft moonlight bathed the garden in a gentle glow inside the small house. 3 hearts of grandmother, a grandson, and a loyal dog shared the warmth of love and tranquility. Clara smiled, her hand gently stroked Toby's silky fur. She knew that her life had entered a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. This story doesn't just end with the joy of a family reunited, but also leaves us with a lesson about friendship, loyalty, and the profound impact that even the smallest beings can have on transforming our lives forever.